I mean, the Blues won the competition last year, so you can't knock them out of that top three. The Hurricanes, I reckon, are going to be a surprise package for everyone. When I'm looking at the Crusaders, now that Jordan's injured, I'm battling to find an X-factor player in that team. You know, I'm an absolute advocate of rugby as a team sport and a community sport because it builds better people. You got to look back in time really to see when did we start ignoring and forgetting about the grassroots of the game.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Super Rugby. Well, just 3 rounds left to go then, and an extraordinary result really on the weekend with the Chiefs going down to Christchurch and doing to the Crusaders what the Hurricanes only a week or two before had done to the Chiefs. How does this rearrange the mindset in terms of who is the best team in the competition? And are those 3 teams that I've named, the 3 New Zealand sides, are they ahead of everyone else, including the 2 Australian sides, the Brumbies and the Reds, who we expect to make it? Well, the All Black icon Murray Mexted, we're very fortunate to have Mex back with us. And I wanted to ask you about that this week. Mex, your expert eye on what you've been looking at, and assess those 3 teams, Chiefs, Crusaders and Hurricanes, for strengths and weaknesses and where you think they're going to all end up.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that, Marty, pre this interview, but I'm very, very surprised that you've named those 3 teams. I mean, how could you name 3 teams? I think this competition has been really effective because if you didn't tell me those 3 names, which you've just told me now, Chiefs, Crusaders,
Hurricanes.
What was the third one?
Hurricanes.
Yeah. Well, you know, you'd have to name 5 teams, wouldn't you? There'd be 5 teams in the running, or 6 teams.
Okay.
So you can't, I mean, the Blues won the competition last year, so you can't knock them out of that top 3. The Hurricanes, I reckon, are going to be a surprise package for everyone. They've just had 2 pretty impressive wins. Hard to go and beat the Brumbies in Canberra. And the third team is the Brumbies.
Okay, well, see, I'd actually...
And in fact, you could add another one there.
The Reds.
You could add the Reds.
Yeah. I see. I argue against that only because I still don't believe that the Brumbies and the Reds are capable of coming to New Zealand and winning games like semi-finals in New Zealand, like having to go and play the Chiefs or the Crusaders. So that's my excuse for saying that. But that's why you're the expert and you're on here to tell us.
And long may it continue, Marty. We want it to be hell for anybody coming over here and trying to win.
Yeah.
That's but we've got to be sportsmanlike about it. And I'd hate to see that change because really, if you look at the past, all the visiting teams that play here say it's very hard to beat New Zealand in New Zealand. And there's no criticism really of there's a little wee bit now and again of some silly guy that passes some lame comment against the touring side. But generally speaking, we're quite good hosts. And I hope we continue to stay that way. Yeah. So anyway, getting back to your 3. Okay, so, you know, that old expression of mine, a good team will invariably beat a team of good players.
Yep.
And I believe that. I think that you can, if you've got a good coach and a good coaching environment, you can bring a team of average to good players together, let's say good players together, and they can win competitions. But I don't think that's relevant when it comes to playing South Africa in South Africa. In other words, or the World Cup semi-final. In other words, you know, it depends on the environment that you're in. And that state, if you want to win those big ones, like win competitions, then you've got to have some X-factor players.
Of course.
And I'm battling, now that, when I'm looking at the Crusaders, now that Jordan's injured, I'm battling to find an X-factor player in that team. Maybe you can help me out.
Well, he's
just
so,
I don't know if there's too many X-factor players.
Yeah, he's just so far and away above everyone else, isn't he? And that's why it's so worrying watching him walk off the field there. Yeah, look, he's one out of the box, that guy, and so important to the All Blacks as well. He is. Look, guys like Christian Cullen were that player. When Jonah was that player. I mean,
that's right.
You had those players that were playing alongside you and that you played against as well. So that's a fair enough comment. But that Crusaders team has been so consistent over so many years, barring last year, of course, by playing as a team. So then, can they absorb the loss of that guy? That's going to be the crucial question in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I'm saying that they haven't got any X-factor players outside Jordan. So if that's the case, they're not going to win the semi-final and the final. Simple as that in my book. You know, you move on to the Chiefs, and you've got Mackenzie, X-Factor player. Taukehaho, who's in the reserve still, he's an X-Factor player. Narrower is fast becoming an X-Factor player. And you'd have to say after last week's game and watching him play sevens, this guy, Leroy Carter, is going to be an X-Factor player too. Now, I've just named 4 guys from the Chiefs that there or thereabouts as far as X-Factors go. And I tried to do the same with the Crusaders and I couldn't. So, and then I had a look at the Hurricanes team, which no one seems to rate.
Well, I think the Chiefs do after that performance in Wellington, Mex. I think they've got in the rear view mirror. They know how good they are.
I don't know. You look at those guys on Sky TV and that Jeff Wilson panel, and I mean Jeff was the 3/4, so you can't expect him to know much about the forwards. But no one ever talks about the Hurricanes. They don't even mention them.
Well, they talk about individual players, yeah.
If you look at their backline, Roygaard, Love, Higgins, Proctor. Now, there'll be a lot of critics out there to say, how can you call Mexted? How can you call those guys X-Factor? Well, they may not be X-Factor, but they're bloody close. They're in a similar boat to Narrower and Carter, really. But name those guys in the Crusaders, I can't. The other thing is, the Blues. I thought that was an extraordinary performance.
Yep. That was their best of the season. You're true. That's right. Yep. They are
in Fiji, and the reason for that is I don't know Vern Cotter, but I feel like I know the type of man he is, and I reckon he said to his guys before the game, "Okay, now I don't want you to move the ball today. I just want you to smash them physically when we've got the ball and attack them." And attack them when they've got the ball. That's all I want you to do. I don't want you to be firing the ball around. Now, that is contrary to Blues rugby for the last 15 years, maybe 20 years.
Except last year, because that's what they did last year. That's what Vern did to them last year, and that's why it was so impressive. He got them back doing that again. They didn't play expansive rugby last year, Mex.
And no, they didn't. You're right. We tend to forget that, actually. You did right, but I mean, when I think of the Blues, I think of very bloody flash. Moving the ball to space and, making a break and drawing the last man and feeding the supporting player. Now, that's sort of stopped with that Blues team because there are other teams in the competition that do it better than they do. And there's a breakdown. I mean, if you look at all the tries that are scored by wingers, there's not a lot of bloody Blues wingers scoring tries.
I don't get put into that position,
The Chiefs, for example, even the Crusaders, the Hurricanes particularly, they've got players, no-name players on the wings who are scoring tries left, right and centre. The back three for the Hurricanes, no one could name the back three for the Hurricanes.
Well, the Hurricanes lost, I reckon, an X-Factor player in Naholo. He was one that you mentioned. I mean, that guy was just getting to the stage where he was playing so well and could turn a game because he's capable of taking 3 guys with him when he plays, like a Bundy Aki or one of those dudes.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I think, I'm not sure. I mean, he's really good on attack. I think he can be an X-Factor player on attack, but I don't know if he's the full quota really at the moment.
We won't get to see anyway.
To be classified in that category, but there's no doubt about it. He's got some excitement factor about him. And his brother did too, didn't he? If you can remember.
Waisaki, yep.
Yeah, so I'm sort of thinking when it comes to the finals, this is the big stuff. This is greater pressure. Better standard of opposition, better standard of individual players and better standard of team, not necessarily better standard of team players, but certainly better standard of individual players who are part of a good team. So I think it's going to be, the finals are going to be for a couple of teams that you're not thinking of at the moment, Marty. Well, I reckon one of those teams will be the Chiefs, which everyone's thinking of because they're such a good, exciting team to watch. And it was a brilliant second half, wasn't it, against the Crusaders?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the Crusaders did what they do well, and they outplayed the Chiefs in the first 20 minutes, big time, and scored tries. And then all of a sudden, this Chiefs team raised the ante. And how many tries did they score in the second half? 3, I think.
Yeah, I think,
three,
it was, I think it was 3 in total, and they kicked those goals. It was that try before half-time was the momentum shift, though, didn't it? They gave themselves the confidence to get back into that game. But I'll also say, look, and we're hearing that Will Jordan may play before the end of Super Rugby, which brings that back into the Crusaders equation. But the Brumbies have come to New Zealand and won, Mex. They beat the Blues at Eden Park, and that's a statement win. The Reds won down in Dunedin against the Highlanders. So both of those teams have come to New Zealand and won. But there's a difference winning against a Blue side that was struggling and a Highlanders side which isn't at the same level as the Chiefs and the Crusaders, and winning on those grounds or winning at the Hurricanes grounds. I think that's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, I think that if you name the top 4 teams, you'd have to put the Brumbies in there.
No question.
The top 4 teams.
No question, yeah.
And they could win that semi-final, there's no doubt about that. So they are definitely in contention. I think the Reds are probably playing above themselves. I think they've got a good spirit. And, the Australian selectors have obviously picked this guy, Kiss, is that his surname?
Les Kiss, yeah.
Les Kiss, as the next Wallaby coach. And he's obviously brought that team together, and they're playing above themselves. So I don't see them making that final. But I certainly see the Brumbies being in contention. And, of course, the Chiefs and the Crusaders will be there or thereabouts. But the team that might surprise everyone may be the Blues, but the team that I think might surprise them is the Hurricanes. When you look at their excitement factor, their X factor in the backs, and yet they've got nothing in the forwards that anyone could name.
Well, apart from Duplessis.
A really, really good forward pack that's playing really well, and they're physically attacking the opposite team. How did they beat the Chiefs? They beat them because they attacked them physically. Mm-hmm. And in the end, they won that battle and scored the tries and won the game. So I don't think you can knock them out of contention yet. I think they're still in contention. But the bottom line is, what a wonderful competition we've had this year. Is.
And look, and it comes down to, almost every game from here on in. When you look at them, there is something riding on these fixtures, isn't there? Especially this weekend at North Harbour, where Moana host the Blues, and whoever loses that game is probably out from that point on. Moana have got 2 really toughies against the Chiefs and the Canes to come, and the Blues have a bye as well, so they don't pick up any points obviously during that round. Then they get New South Wales, so there's that game. You've also got New South Wales hosting the Crusaders. The Crusaders have also got to go away and play the Brumbies in the last round. The Blues have got New South Wales at home in the last round, so there's so much jeopardy going on. It's been a fabulous competition. I refuse to indulge in any criticism of it this year, Mex. I think they've got it right. I think the referees have got it right. I just think that the entertainment factor has been the unpredictability of the results. These are all the things that we moan about every year, but I think they do have it right this year, and they deserve to be congratulated for it. It's been a really good comp to watch. I defy anyone to argue against that.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm not going to argue. I'm going to support you, Marty, because I think you're dead right. You've nailed it. But what worries me is World Rugby.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean,
World Rugby be sitting up there in the Northern Hemisphere, sitting in their chairs and say, oh, yes, but that's not real Test match rugby. It's, it's too good. Yeah, too good to be Test match rugby.
It's too exciting.
Let's stuff it up and make the referees the number 1 person on the field.
And we saw a bit of that, and TJ brought that up.
They'll go back to that strict during international
over-policing.
matches. And you won't see the flavour. And, when you get used to moving the ball around...
that's the point of the game, isn't it?
Under these new rules. It's a beautiful game to watch, there's no doubt about it. The beautiful game is back. It's back. But it's not back in the Northern Hemisphere. And referees aren't going to allow it.
Well, let's just hope that for the international season, and especially with those 2 tests against the Springboks here, we get the French here, obviously, so you could have an Australian referee. I'm hoping that they pick one of them top Aussie refs for the South African and New Zealand games as well, because I'm with you. There are variations in the interpretations, and you don't want it to be dominated by that or a TMO or anything like that. The Australian referees know how we play down under, and there's plenty of them that are plenty good enough to ref those 2 test matches for the South Africans and the All Blacks, surely.
Yeah, I think they're a bit trigger happy, those Australian referees, actually. I think our referees are a step ahead of those boys.
Well, they're just not allowed to ref.
The Aussie referees are a bit fickle in many respects. But, the interesting thing I think is going back to the World Game. If you said, who would be the top 3 teams in the world playing at home in their own backyard, who would be those top three?
Well, South Africa are obviously one. We're one, and I'd say France would probably be the other.
Yeah, you've got it. That's exactly right. And probably most people would say that. Now, and we've got France and South Africa coming to New Zealand. Isn't that fantastic?
Oh, it's brilliant.
That is absolutely fantastic.
And I don't care what anyone says about what French team they send. They'll be tough.
The French have always been traditionally poor away from home, and that stems from their local game in France. Everyone expects their team to win at home, doesn't matter what team it is and who they're playing. And when they go away from home, they expect them to lose. And France are a bit like that on tour, because it's almost become inbred in the success of teams. So, I think we'll account for the French over here. I'm hoping we will. And, you call it a second team if you want to call it, but I don't call it that at all.
They got enough players.
Got so many players at top level that they rotate.
Yeah, they have, man. They got heaps. They got, honestly, they got 30, 40, 50 players. They could actually probably pick a couple of sides. They'll be missing one or two big names, but, I'm not underestimating that side. And don't forget, mate, I think in 2009 they came down here. They didn't apparently have a strong side. Well, they won the first test against us that year. So, they come down and they burgle a test every now and again. So I'd be very wary of them. Yeah,
they can do that. What's that? Was it the try from the end of the world they called it?
Yeah, 94. Yeah. I mean, look, they're the last team to win at Eden Park, remember? So, they'll be sitting there looking at it going, we don't want South Africa to do that. We'd be quite happy to do it ourselves again. They got plenty of motivation,
Frank Manel, he was on that team that beat the All Blacks at Eden Park, and he went back to France and he started a fashion label called Eden Park.
Really?
He did, and they sell fashion gear in about 20 different countries around the world.
God, he's made a fortune from bloody beating us at Eden Park. I tell you what, there's a bar in Paris too. I don't know whether you went there during the World Cup called Eden Park as well. I went there for a couple. That was a bloody good bar too.
No, I didn't see that, but I know Frank, and his logo is a little wee pink bow tie. Now, who else but the French?
Yeah.
But the French. What other rugby team in the world would have a logo as a pink bow tie?
I remember you saying to me, mate, and we'll wrap it up on this. I remember you saying to me that changed your life, that experience in France, didn't it? In so many different ways, going over and playing rugby there, because it wasn't just about the rugby, was it? You actually, it actually brought you some life.
It certainly did. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I don't come from a big city. I come from a little town.
And Tawa, a little village there in Wellington, yeah.
Yeah, they think I'm from Wellington, but there's a big difference between a little village like Tawa. But so when I arrived in France, it was like being on a planet Mars.
Yeah, I bet.
It's just
this is back in what, the 70s, Mex? Was it the early 80s? Was it early 80s?
Hell, I learned to love it,
Yeah.
And when I came home, I thought, how conservative are we?
We, of course, yeah. Hey, finally, before we go, how much of a worry is it New Zealand Rugby announcing yet another loss? They seem to announce it like they've actually achieved something and won something. Oh, we're near break even. We only lost 19 point something $million. I mean, if New Zealand Rugby isn't making money, especially in these economic times, I find it a real worry. You just got to talk to people in clubs how they're struggling. anyone that isn't getting paid or on the payroll are the real people who are actually, contributing to the game, and how much of a struggle it is for clubs and for actually getting players, getting coaches, getting volunteers, and all of that. I don't know. I just thought that it got washed over last week, and I thought the covering of it by the journalists was really weak, and not a lot of questions asked.
Well, this is very close to my heart because as I grew up on the sideline of a rugby field in Tawa, you could see that our boundary was on the boundary of the field. So I grew up and I understand what it does for little villages, and to see the demise of rugby throughout the country and the lack of activity at headquarters. I think I've said this before, Marty, on your program, but you got to look back in time really to see when did we start ignoring and forgetting about the grassroots of the game. And it was certainly under Steve Chew's reign, and Mark Robinson's taken over, and I don't think much has changed, to be frank. We've forgotten about the base of the game, and it needs some help, and the game needs to be marketed and exposed for the great game it is, because it's still a great game. The game is, in fact, better than it ever was. And then when you see a good team playing a good brand of rugby, it's poetry in motion, without doubt. It's the greatest team sport in the world, I think, 15 players on a field. I mean, rugby league, they said, let's put less players on the rugby field and you'll have more action. And in some regards, they achieved that. But there's a lot more to the game of rugby union than there is necessarily in rugby league because of the competition factor in lineouts and scrums and the breakdown, which doesn't really exist in rugby league. And I think that's a really important factor. And it takes every shape and size of an individual. In rugby league, once again, that doesn't exist. But there's a big difference between a number 3 tight head prop and a Will Jordan number 15. And different shapes, sizes, even approach to the game is completely different backgrounds, these sorts of things. So I think that I'm an absolute advocate of rugby as a team sport and a community sport because it builds better people and it enables people to learn to live with people who are completely different to them.
This is the DSPN.